Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here from Duke's Models, and welcome to episode 13 of the A-6 Intruder build. Now, I'm sure that y'all are very keen to see the Intruder start to hit primer and paint, and to be honest, so am I. But we've still got some shit we've got to go through. I know that in 12 it was all about the Ordnance, and I was hoping to take it a bit further and really start in on the multiple ejector racks, but I have decided to order some resin ones from Edward and see how they stack up to the trumpeter kit ones. So because of that, and because of the vagaries of shipping in this wonderful time, I do not believe they are showing up until Monday, which is several days away from when I'm taping this. So I'm going to set those aside for now and we'll pick them up later. And I'm going to move on to something I've been procrastinating about for quite a while. The windscreen and the canopy. Yay. Okay, so before we get into it, I want to walk through sort of what all needs to happen and maybe kind of go through the process that I have in my mind. So first of all, we need to clean up the sprue tabs here and here. And they're big old thick monogram looking fuckers, so you need to be careful not to carve a divot out of the frame and any of that kind of stuff. Then let's set this guy. Well, I need this. Looking at these on this is a pain in the ass. Alright. So on the canopy, we've got this inset piece here that needs, painting, weathering, all that good stuff. I also need to drill a couple holes because one fun feature of Intruders during Desert Storm was that a lot of them had flat curtains installed, and basically there was literally a curtain rod that went from that bulkhead up to the canopy frame here at about sort of shoulder height. And so the idea was when you're flying through ground fire, you slide the curtain shut, and it, kind of like putting the big wool blankets over castle walls and shit in the Renaissance to deaden cannonballs. Same idea. If something gets to the cockpit or gets to the canopy, it'll at least catch some of the shrapnel. So maybe potentially life-saving. I don't think any Intruders actually came up against that as a specific need in the actual conflict, but the curtain and the curtain rod were there. So I will definitely be installing that curtain rod, and for that I need to drill a few holes. There goes the bottle. I need to drill a few holes in the actual bulkhead. So that's the first thing. Then there's some shit that we need to install up here, but I'm going to probably wait until I get everything masked and painted, and then we're just going to drop that in with some PVA glue. A little bit of CA perhaps. Another big thing, and this also applies to the windscreen, is this leading edge of the frame here. If you look at reference photos, cannot wait to glue this fucking thing because it's super squirrely. Anyway, if you look at reference photos, there is weather stripping that runs along the front of this canopy frame. And there's also like a little ledge that sticks out here that the weather stripping kind of sits on. And the same deal on this guy. So that's not really present at the moment. You can look there, it's just a big flat wall, basically. Well, that's not cool. So what I'm planning to do is take this little thin strip of evergreen styrene. I believe it is 0.25 millimeters thick by 2 millimeters wide, something like that. For some reason they label other shit in metric or in standard, and even though I am American and Texan, and so I don't really think in metric, when it comes to model shit, I do think in metric. So it's 0.010 inches or some bullshit like that. It's nice and thin and floppy, all that kind of stuff. And the idea is to basically, this is going to take some finesse, which, God help us. The idea is basically to come in and sort of situate this right on the leading edge of the frame like this. And thankfully the Intruder's got nice thick frame, so this is going to be hopefully pretty easy once we just get everything aligned. and then just drop a little bit of extra thin in there to lock this in place. And this will provide that little ledge, and it will also provide a nice locating point for some tubing, or I might end up using, you know, lead wire or something like that. But something basically right in there to represent that weather stripping. So that has me a little bit intimidated, because playing with extra thin around canopy parts is always a bit exciting. After that happens, it is time to mask off the inside and outside of the glass. This needs a very good wiping and dusting and all that stuff before that actually happens. The inside will be sprayed a near black. I'll probably go with my good old night camo black. I might gray it up just a bit, but basically get the inside covered with that. Get the outside, probably go ahead and paint the outside, at least on the canopy. May as well do the windscreen while I'm at it, right? Somewhere in all that process, I also need to come in here and paint the forward two windows of the windscreen with sort of a very light blue-green clear. It's something I've done several times. It's not particularly challenging, but it's always intimidating as hell to give it a go, because if something runs or pools, it looks like shit. So we'll get to that. But first, it is a matter of cleaning off these sprue tabs. So let me remove this troublesome bastard. I'm going to start with the 1, 2, 3s. That is the super shitty thing about clear styrene, is it is super brittle compared to regular styrene, and so you have to be careful it doesn't crack anything. I think we managed to get that pretty decently, though. I typically find that it comes when you have kind of like more shit hanging off is when breaking is more likely, so cut it close. Come in and cut it really close. I wish honestly sand the whole thing, because it's kind of, this edge is kind of janky. As you can see, it's kicking up some shit around the frame edge here. Alright, got that one. Oh, that's going to be interesting. So, that sort of accessory rail right there is going to be interesting when I'm trying to get that clear styrene installed. We're going to have to think about that. I might do 2 pieces and then just skip that part and run the weather stripping on top of it. We'll see. Okay, so this is super, super dicey to get into position here. Thankfully, once it is in position, it locks down pretty well. You know what, now that I think about it, I don't even need to worry about that section. Where is my clippers? There they are. Okay. We got one side down. Holy shit. Okay. Got one side knocked out. This one's going to be the real test. Because yoink. Alright, tape's not going to solve it, because it won't hold it right. I'm gonna go walk around for a few minutes, calm my nerves, and we'll knock this one out. Okay, so I think this clamp is gonna serve its purpose. Allow me to get in here and actually glue this shit down. I hope. You want to fray your nerves though. Extra thin styrene to clear part. Good thing is this shit sets fast. Cool. Okay, an extra bit of good news. I was looking at a reference photo of Cupcake 511, and I'm not seeing the flat curtain bars, so we don't have to bother with installing them. Sweet. On to whatever comes next. Okay, next up it's time to mask at least most of the clear parts. So, I've got an Edward mask here, and I have to say I'm pretty happy to see how they've arranged it, because typically when I'm dealing with Edward masks, I have to cut them and quarter them and all that shit to make them fit. At least with the main canopy and the side windows on the windscreen, they've already been quartered for me, so I don't have to worry about that. And it's all about just making sure that, you know, you line up to the frames and you hit the corners. You don't have to worry about, oh, this one's too wide, or oh, this one's too short, whatever. You literally just have to frame it in. So that's what we're gonna do, and that will honestly make it a lot easier to mask the inside as well. So, you get the idea. I'll pick back up once these are masked. Okay, so I've got most of the masks on, and I went ahead and post-it noted the fill for this one, and I don't really know why, because I have liquid mask. Basically, put this on nice and thick so I can not have to worry about it lifting because I touch it funny or any of that bullshit. Okay, so I'm going to let that set up for a little bit. Okay, so the liquid mask has dried nicely, and now it is time to deal with the blue-green tint on the central windscreen frames. For this, I'm going to be using Tamiya Clear Blue, here it is, and Clear Green. I know there are a lot of other clear options, but honestly, while I like some of the others for different things, when it comes to tinting clear styrene, I still prefer the Tamiya stuff. I'm going to use a little bit of GX100. Why? Well, basically the GX100 will provide a bit of a base for the clear so that we don't have to worry about so much running, spidering, shit like that. Mr. Leveling Thinner. There is entirely a chance that this will be too much color in here and we'll have to cut it back. I think. Alright. I'll try one more thing before we get down to spraying the intruder. So we're going to try the windscreen. That actually worked perfectly. And then when you see on the cap, when you have a nice background there, it shows how well that works. Set it like so. Alright, that tells me there's hope for doing the inside. So we will take a deep breath. Give it a shot. Okay, so this is super fucking annoying, but as it's dried on the inside, it has gone kind of crispy and crunchy. And there's also some phloem in there. So, fuck. It's time to strip that off. And for that, I'm going to be using some Mr. Leveling Thinner. Okay, we're going to try again. Back to the Tamiya Clear Blue and Clear Green. This time I'm using some Guns Mr. Hobby Clear instead of the GX100. I've got some retarder in it too. That's annoying as shit. Motherfucker. Okay, we're gonna give this one more shot before I start screaming. Hopefully on the inside we won't have to worry about it pulling away from the sides. Alright, we're gonna leave that and see how that shakes out. Okay. So now that we've got the blue-green down on the windscreen, it is time to apply the masks, and I'm going to give this a shot, but I'm going to guess that we're going to have to quarter it. Just knowing Trumpeter and Edward. So for this inside parts, I really want to detack this because I don't want it pulling shit up or marring anything. Okay, we are masked. Fantastic. Now, before we move on to the next stuff, I will say one kind of final word about the Edward masks here. They've actually, the fit is some of the best fit I've had on one of their mask sets in quite a while, which is saying something. It is frustrating, however, that it only includes parts for the actual canopy and windscreen. So You have nothing for the FLIR turret, you have nothing for any of the positioning lights or any of that kind of stuff. That's all just on its own. Do what you gotta do. Thankfully, the harder parts, like, you know, these rounded windscreen panels, things like that, are a pain in the ass, so I'm glad they nailed those. But it would have been nice to have a few extra little doodads here and there. Anyway, now that we've got these done, we can go ahead and start putting some color against this stuff. So let's get on with it. Okay, now that everything is masked, it's time to move on to the framing itself. And I'm going to start off with MRP's 255 Night Camo Black. I love this stuff because, as you can see, it is almost black, but not quite. I've used it several times before. And the goal for this is to represent the interior framing, but we're going to get it on all the shit, because we masked both sides. Sweet. Now for this, I want to start out slow, nice and easy. Okay, so I've got the main canopy part painted in Night Camo Black, and I've also gone ahead and painted up some of the smaller parts. So here we've got the map lights that go up in the center spine of the canopy. A little bit of wiring box bullshit. I believe this is a compass slash sort of heading reader for the top of the windscreen, and this little box. And with this little box, I've drilled 3 holes in it that I'm going to put some switches and shit in, just to add a little bit of life. So next it's time to spray a bit of gray. Okay, we're going to start out with a bit of dark gunship gray, MRP 241. I know I've used this paint before in videos, maybe not in the Intruder video. Basically, I don't think it does a great job of being 36081 unless you're talking about like a really, like literally derelict faded out version. But it's a nice, dirty, warm gray, which is good for putting underneath cooler grays like ghost grays. I'm not paying as much attention to the windscreen because we're going to be going back and having to touch up parts of it as we go anyway. Next up, we're going to lay down some light ghost gray, good old MRP 38. For our next trick, I'm going to go back to MRP 38 light ghost gray. One thing of it. One thing of MRP 97 dark ghost gray. To that I'm going to add just a little dollop of Mr. Leveling Thinner. Not much, just a tiny little bit. Okay, now we're going to blend this together. Got to keep in mind that we're going to be doing a bunch of weathering on top of this too, so it seems a little bit too stark. Deal with it. Okay. That looks pretty awesome. Let's go and finish off the party over here. Alright. There we have it. The exterior painted on Canopy parts. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and install these little doomajiggies. These guys I'm going to wait and put in later. So they're a little bit intense. And now to close out the evening's festivities, we're going to spray some MRP 127 matte varnish. So one last thing to sort out before I can go ahead and start installing the windscreen is dealing with the little piece that goes right in up here. Everything else is pretty much good to go. That piece is, I believe it's a compass or sort of a heading indicator, something like that. At least that's what it is on the Dauntless I built a while back, and I'm assuming that sort of same place, you know, rear view mirror style almost, is just to make sure you're on the right heading and all that stuff. It could be something else. Trumpeter provides no indication of what it is, but reference photos show some wires coming out of it and sort of running basically down the center spine of the windscreen, which is cool. I mean, it's a little bit of something. So I've got some lead wire shoved in there, super glued in place and all that good stuff. And I've got these lead foil straps that are basically cable ties. And these came off of wine bottles and things like that. Basically been saving them up for a while, and they're always useful. Nice and pliable and flat and whatnot. But now comes the tricky part of curving them around the lead wire without seriously fucking shit up. Basically just been CA'd in place. Nothing too fancy. Good God, this is intricate work. Okay, there's that business. Now this needs to be painted. Now we can install it. So in the last video, we spent a lot of time getting the Ordnance situated, drilling things out, getting mounts ready and whatnot. And then after I finished the video, I decided, you know what, these Trumpeter multiple ejector racks, I'm not that crazy about them. And I decided to replace them with some Edward ones, which, even though I've read they aren't accurate, you know what, the Trumpeter ones aren't winning any awards for this either, and the Edward ones are way more detailed, and they have ultimately much beefier mounting options. So, bye-bye, Trumpeter. Now, this necessitated re-drilling a couple of holes, because the spacing is different and things like that. You know, if you look at sort of where the sway braces and the little pins on them are, they do not match up with where we have available lugs on the Edward Myrrh. So, went in, re-drilled a few holes, no big deal. Installed some 1-inch brass tubing, and now we have pretty darn good mounts for the rock eyes. So that's one of them. maybe. Oh, it'll flop on its side like that. The other one over here like this. And then, based on a fun reference photo I found in a book, we're going to be putting the LAU-10 on a triple ejector rack, and it's going to be mounted to one of the interior pylons. So, just a little bit of something to give it a bit more visual interest than just hanging off a pylon, right? And the cool thing about these is if you see these mounting lugs up here, they install right into these little square mounting holes in the trumpeter pylon. So, boom, there you go. There's our LAU-10. And we get to use the exact same mounting lugs, just maybe the further spaced ones, for the multiple ejector racks, which provides a nice, just right amount of distance, good beefy hold. They are floppy in here, so they're going to have to be, epoxied or something like that when the time comes. But for now, that's much more assured than what I was looking at before. So, yay. Okay, so it's just about time to get the windscreen installed. And for the most part, it fits decently. The problem is, and it's really hard to see from this angle, if I slide it over here a little bit, you can see kind of along the edge here, it sits a little bit in from the fuselage, and it does it on both sides. And so what we need to do is sort of spread it out like this, and then basically hold it while it sets up, which is going to be a whole lot of fun. Part of me is saying, wait and do it tomorrow because it's late. But part of me is saying, fuck it. And I think the part of me that's saying, fuck it, is probably going to end up winning out. Air moving over this stuff. Okay, so I think no matter what happens here, we're going to have to be putting some sort of putty or some sort of shaving along the sides here just a little bit, just to smooth that out. Alright. So let's go ahead and glue this bastard. Okay, so with that, I'm going to call this an evening, and we'll come back and do a bit of cleanup here, and then hopefully get into painting before too much longer. Alright, so I've been doing a little bit of probing around the sides of the windscreen with this micro chisel here, basically using it as a scraping tool to remove some very slight shavings of the fuselage sides, just to bring them more in line with the windscreen itself. Fortunately, on the reference photos, there is no line of any kind between the windscreen and the actual fuselage on the sides. You can see some on the front here with these oval-ish windows, but on the sides, it's just, there's nothing. So now that we've scraped this down, I'm going to bring in some super red, and like I did on the P-47, use it to kind of get everything together. Just to give myself a little bit of extra working time with it, I'm going to add a little bit of Mr. Leveling Thinner. Okay, that's looking pretty decent. It's obviously going to shrink up a bit. So I will plan to revisit it after I get this other side. One little fun side effect of the Super Red, because it does have this tendency to shrink a little bit, it'll also help reveal where we need to pump up the volume a little bit. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and knock out the rock eyes too. Be right back. Okay, the windscreen putty has had overnight to set up, and now it is time to move on to the cleanup stage. And I've had a comment or two asking to show this in detail, so we're going to walk through at least one side of it. Personally, I find it about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it is a step that has to be gone through, and it's always useful to kind of see these things in action. So, first of all, what are we going to be needing? Well, a couple of assorted sanding sticks. Nothing fancy here. I like these because they've got a little bit of give, but not too much, and they're nice and skinny, so you really can't screw too much shit up with them. Some various squares of sanding sponge. This one here is, to me, a 400 grit, but I've also got 600, 1000, etc. I'm having to get used to this camera angle. A little dish of water for wet sanding purposes, and a fiberglass pen for smoothing out shit at the end. Now, the main goal of this, obviously, is to knock down the putty and all that, but to do so without destroying too much shit on the actual windscreen itself. So it's a matter of working small. And I've moved the camera to hopefully give a better view of what's happening. I apologize if my hand gets in the way. Basically just come in here and slowly sand. The one thing I'm trying to keep away from is what you can see right here of the red dust getting into the area by the mask. It's the only thing that we really need to look out for. And frustratingly, that is made more likely by wet sanding, but wet sanding is also what's going to keep the dust from flying into the cockpit. So now, something happened a bit earlier today when I posted the shot of the windscreen with the putty on it over on my Facebook page. I got a comment asking if I was a modeler or an assembler. I assume because I was saying that the Intruder's windscreen is just, it's a bitch of a shape to mold. It's got weird curves in it. It's got sort of M-shaped things going on up front. It's got these sweeping curves around the back, along with a fuselage that's sort of folding up around. It's just, there's a lot happening, and so it's a pain in the ass to mold. And there's really not a good way to do like what, say, Tamiya did with the Corsair or the Tomcat, where they sort of extended the range of where the clear part goes. It just kind of has to go here, and so they did their best, I think. Still needs cleanup, but giving them a bit of grace. And I was asked if I was a modeler or an assembler, and my response to that was, well, this is a kit. So, I think that answers that question. Personally, the whole modeler assembler thing to me is one of the more tedious and bullshit back and forth drama things that happens in this hobby. I'm of the opinion that unless you're literally scratch building shit from plastic, you are an assembler. If you buy a kit of something, you assemble it. There may be aspects of cleanup and shit like that happen, such as this, because the kit is not perfect. But that doesn't make you a modeler over an assembler. And I've long thought that people who like to sort of wallow in that swamp. Often try to use that as an excuse for why they stick to shittier kits or things like that, or why they don't put effort into painting versus assembling. But that's just my opinion. But I also believe it. I have to go back and look because I only had a chance to glance at it very briefly at the end of the day. But I believe that there was a response on there that was like, "Yeah, it can be frustrating, but how else would we build our skills?" Blah blah blah. And to that, I'm just gonna say, what I'm doing is not a fucking skill. I am rubbing sandpaper, a sandpaper sponge, back and forth over plastic in a repeatable pattern, and occasionally wiping some shit off. This is not a fucking skill. What it is patience and persistence in the face of a tedious task. That's it. And I give much more skill to people who are willing to scratch build things, people who are willing to cut kits apart and recombine them in kit bash and make shit fit together. Or straight up, building kits from scratch. That's a whole different thing. Bodywork, I mean, the only reason that this is in any way challenging is that it is right next to clear parts, and you don't want to fuck up clear parts with sanding. That's literally the only real challenge here. The rest of this is just slow and steady wins the race type shit. As Forrest Gump would say, that's all I've got to say about that. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. Right in here, there's a little tiny imperfection I want to see if I can kind of get out. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. Cool, and that is one side pretty much sorted. We won't know for sure until it gets a bit of primer on it and all that stuff. But I'm pretty happy with where it's at. Okay, so we've got one more task to go before we call this video a wrap. And we can move on to, holy shit, actually priming and painting this thing. And that is installing the pylons. So first up, we've got the center pylon. This is where the drop tank is going to go. Plan for this and the other ones is a bit of super glue on the actual posts, and then we're going to use extra thin around the sides and shit. Now, full disclaimer that when we get into priming, there may be a point where we have to pause and do a little bit of extra touch-up and filling and things like that, because it's really tough to see all that with this thing in its current state. Okay, now we've got the inner pylons. Okay, so there we go. We've got the Intruder sitting pretty, ready to go for primer. I might need to do, again, a few small touch-ups here and there as shit goes on and I notice things that I missed or that need additional attention. But for the most part, it's ready to go. So, stay tuned for the joy that will be part 14, where we finally get to start putting paint down on this guy.